The Scops sang of it in hushed tones. The runes foretold it in carved stone. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, an inescapable, bloody destiny that promised the end of all things. It was a saga of a great winter, of wolves devouring the sun and moon, of a final, glorious battle on the plains of Vigrid, where god and monster would fall in a storm of fire and ruin. Odin, the Allfather, spent ages peering into the threads of fate, sacrificing his eye, hanging from the world tree, all to find a way to defy the inevitable. He shaped his rule, his sons, and his realm around this single, terrifying certainty. But what if the threads of fate could be rewoven? What if the prophecy was not a promise, but a prison? What if a single, crucial moment went differently, and the end of all things never came? This is the story of that secret timeline, of an Asgard without an end, and the terrible price of eternity. The catalyst for the great unraveling was meant to be a single, tragic act, the death of Balder, the shining god. In the accepted telling, Loki guided a mistletoe dart into the heart of the god of light. But in this timeline, the fates blinked. As the blind god Hodor stood, a pawn in Loki's cruel game, a glint of light caught Thor's eye. It was an unnatural shimmer on the wood. Thor's voice boomed across the glade, calling for his brother to halt. He strode forward, took the dart, and saw it for what it was, a weapon laced with Loki's cunning. He turned his gaze to Loki, whose mask of feigned innocence was already cracking. There was no murder, no martyrdom. Balder lived, and the first thread of Ragnarok's tapestry was pulled loose. A wave of relief washed over Asgard, so profound that none saw the new, darker thread being woven in its place. With the prophecy averted, Asgard entered a supposed golden age. But Odin's relief was replaced by a new obsession. He had not defeated the prophecy, merely sidestepped it. He would not allow chaos to threaten his realm again. If fate could not be trusted, then he would become the master of fate itself. His rule changed. The Allfather's wisdom curdled into authoritarian control. He declared that the greatest threat was not giants or monsters, but free will. New laws etched in magic were decreed. The dwarves were commanded to produce for Asgard's glory. The elves found their art censored, and Midgard was watched by Odin's spies. This was not peace. It was a gilded cage, and its bars were forged from Odin's fear. Thor, the god of thunder, was the chief enforcer of this new order. Yet doubt began to fester as he witnessed the fear and resentment in the realms. His breaking point came in Vanaheim, where he was sent to silence a council of old friends. He returned to Asgard with a heavy heart and confronted his father, declaring that this was not justice, but tyranny. Odin, his single eye cold and distant, dismissed his son's concerns. Justice, he argued, was order, a gift of safety from the fires of Ragnarok. Thor countered passionately, screaming that this safety was a cage, smothering the very essence of life. But the Allfather was resolute, calling freedom an illusion for fools, and reminding Thor that he was the strongest wall in the fortress of eternity he had built. Meanwhile, Loki found himself in a peculiar hell. He was not tortured, but worse. He was irrelevant. In Odin's perfect, predictable world, a creature of chaos was a relic. his every move monitored. For the first time, Loki saw himself not as a villain, but as a dissident, a symbol of the freedom they had lost. Even his son, the great wolf Fenrir, was kept as a tamed beast, a trophy of Odin's power to control prophecy itself. The wolf's eyes, however, still held a wild, untamable fire. Thor's perfect world had become a prison, and its warden was his own father. He was forced to question his loyalty, his honor, and his very purpose. An impossible choice lay before him. If you want to witness how this desperate god sparks an unthinkable rebellion, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the chaos that comes next. His pleas rejected, Thor sought out the only being who hated Odin's order more than he now did. He found Loki in his monitored chambers, where the trickster greeted him with his usual biting sarcasm, questioning if the mighty enforcer had come for a lecture or had simply lost his hammer again. Thor, dispensing with pleasantries, stated plainly that he needed Loki's help to stop his father's tyranny. Loki erupted in bitter laughter. He found the irony delightful that the dutiful son now saw the oppression that had always existed, but only because it was now affecting him. Thor pressed on, admitting that while he had the strength, he lacked the cunning to defeat a foe who could see everything. Loki, ever the strategist, questioned Thor's endgame. Was it simply to trade one king for another? Thor's response was radical: to shatter the throne itself and return freedom to the 9 realms. Seeing the desperate honesty in his brother's eyes, Loki agreed. A dangerous smile played on his lips as he warned Thor that chaos, once unleashed, could not be so easily tamed. The assault on Asgard was one of whispers and shadows. Loki, in his element, wove a web of misinformation, blinding the All-Father's foresight for the first time in an age. Thor's role was far more direct. He walked into the great hall and stood before the throne. Odin acknowledged the betrayal, admitting it was a vision he had dismissed, a pain sharper than the prophecy of Ragnarok itself. Thor renounced him, declaring that the father he knew was gone, replaced by a tyrant seeking only power. Their battle began, a storm of cosmic force. Thor's lightning crashed against Odin's ancient runes, but he was outmatched. Just as Odin prepared a final, unmaking spell, Loki's illusion plunged the hall into darkness. The trickster's voice echoed from the shadows, mocking the All-Father for forgetting that chaos could never truly be controlled. While Odin was ensnared in a labyrinth of his own fears, Loki directed Thor to the source of his power, the throne itself. With a final, sorrowful apology to the father he once knew, Thor raised Mjolnir high and brought it down. The throne shattered. The magic holding Odin's perfect order together broke, and the All-Father slumped, not dead, but diminished. An old god, stripped of his might, trapped in a slumber of his own making. Asgard was free. The prophecy of Ragnarok was dead, and so was the age of Odin's perfect order. Thor and Loki stood in the ruins, 2 opposing forces who had aligned to shatter a common prison. They had saved the 9 realms from tyranny, but unleashed a future no one could predict. What happens now? Does Thor become a wiser king? Does Loki seize power? Or does a new threat awaken? The future is a blank page. and the story is now yours to write. Let us know in the comments what you think happens next.